Hi, friends, and welcome to my new podcast, Sparkles and Sunsets, a Twilight fan podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be going chapter by chapter through each book. We're going to also be doing like these side books like Midnight Sun, and we'll do Life and Death. I don't know how much we're going to be able to go over within that one. And then we'll have specific episodes dedicated to the movies. Maybe we'll split the movies into parts and talk about them in the same order that we're going to talk about the books. So I am returning to read Twilight for like the first time in, I don't even know, like maybe 10 years. And I've been a fan of Twilight for a very long time. As you guys can see, this is an older Twilight t-shirt. I have a Twilight collection lingering behind me. I watch it like 4 times a year. I love Twilight. But I haven't read the books with sincerity in years. And so I was like, you know what? Let's read them with like a fully formed cortex and let's go through them and talk about them chapter by chapter from my point of view. So again, I'm not affiliated with Twilight or Stephanie Meyer or anyone and any of the subsidiaries. I'm just me going through talking about parts of the book. I have my Kindle right here. I don't like the new covers, but I have the Kindle edition right here that I've been highlighting, and we're going to go over my highlights and we're going to talk about the book in chronological order. If you want to pause this and read the chapter and then get back and watch and share your thoughts with me too, that would be super fun. But let's get right into it. So I don't know how I didn't remember this, but before this story even starts, there's a Bible verse. Genesis 2:17. But the tree of I'm so bad at reading out loud. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for the day that thou shalt eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And from what I'm to understand, this is in relation to Adam and the instructions that God gave Adam. And then we're going to go through, there's a preface before the first chapter, and it starts off exactly how the movies start off with, I never given much thought about how I would, do I have to say unalive for like, we're talking in a book? We'll just do that for the sake of the algorithm. So basically, the first part is Bella just being really, really, really emo and sad and like a teenager. My mother drove me to the airport with the windows rolled down. And so I have a lot of things. We go through a lot actually in this first chapter. We go all the way from Bella getting dropped off in Forks. The story continues to the point where she's trying to go to the guidance office or something, and Edward's already there trying to switch out of her class. Like they have the full stinky class scene. And so all of that's within the first chapter. But here's a highlighted piece that I have from the first page. I was wearing my favorite shirt. Sleeveless, white eyelet lace. I was wearing it as a farewell gesture. My carry-on was a parka. Honestly, slay. That sounds kind of like a cute outfit. I know we talk a lot about the khaki. Genuinely could be a very cute outfit. And honestly, it means a lot to me that Bella's taking her airport style very seriously. I love people who are so stylish. My favorite people at the airport are the people that are super stylish at the airport. One time I was with this, like sitting next to this lady, and I don't know if it was fake. Who knows? You know, honestly, I'm too poor to know. But this lady was dripping in what appeared to be Chanel and smelt very strongly of perfume, and everything was so distinctly branded Chanel. And I think about her a lot. I'm like, slay queen. I don't know. When I go, I wear like matching tracksuits. Like I've traveled in a matching Neopets tracksuit.
Online can now be your friends at home. Voice-activated Neopets respond to your voice.
I wore a matching Care Bears tracksuit, and that kind of sums up my attire while traveling. And so I remember reading this, and I read this in junior high as a child, and I had to lie to my mom to be able to read it because my mom thought it was like a naughty book. And I was like, but mom, it's on the summer reading list. There was no summer reading list. And there was actually no other books that I came up with on the summer reading list. It was just Twilight. I just really wanted to read Twilight. Copyright free, hoa, hoa, hoa. And I did, and I loved it. And I checked it out from the library, and then I checked it out from the school library. Yeah, I really became infatuated with it quite quickly as a teenager. And I think some of it is the setting. When I was reading this, I was like an emo, like 12, 13-year old, I think, when I was first accessing Twilight. And I don't even remember what possessed me to get it. I think it was just sitting there, and it I don't know, it spoke to me. I was like, wow, like the art was cool and different, and it looked like something I wanted to check out. And I was like, vampires? Shoot. And then as I started reading, I was like, a romance? I think this was my first romance I ever read. And now I'm like on to much different things. But yeah, I think this was the first romance I had ever read. And so it was like the start of an era that I would continue reading into now I'm 30. But I remember reading this. I remember reading this book specifically in the winter, and it was describing Forks as being under a near constant cover of clouds. It rains on this inconsequential town more than any other place in the United States of America. And I was like, that sounds lovely. I want to go to Forks. And I think I remember telling people that as a fun fact. I was like, do you want to know where it like rains the most? It's this place called Forks. But I don't know. I needed to get out of the small town. I remember being like, that sounds nice. I don't know what you're going on about, Bella, but like reading this again, Bella, and like I'm trying to read this and be sympathetic because Bella's a teenager. She really complains a lot in this first chapter and says a few things where I'm like, whoa, girl, slow down. It's just like little things she says, or like backhanded things she says. This inconsequential town. It's like that part in The Beauty and the Beast. Don't they say this? What do they say? This poor provincial place. Like she's just downing. She's like, nothing changes. It's just like this the whole time, always, and the people are like small minded. Or it's like the same thing with like the Wizard and I. They say they're like the Munchkins, so small minded. I'm like, that's very mean, but fair in some of those instances, I guess. And so, also reading through the same page, um, she's obviously moving to Forks now, but she put her foot down. She said, and made Charlie go visit her for several weeks out of the year, and Charlie would do that. Like Charlie put in the time and the effort. Like it seems like even though Charlie was like a far away parent, he still was trying to be a present parent. My perception of Bella reading through this chapter is Bella is a parentified child by Renee, and I think it's abundant in a few different parts of the book, and we'll go into that. She's not looking forward to moving to Forks. But yeah, she talks about, I loved Phoenix. I love the sun. I love the blistering heat. I love the vigorous, sprawling city. I don't know why she'd go move to Forks then. Like, why would that be the plan? Also, again, back to the thing about there's more rain than any other place in the United States. It's sort of true. It seems like it's the Aberdeen area, and I don't know how close. I know it's like in the same region, but what counts as that? It's like I don't know. I know Aberdeen's a place. I visited Newport, Oregon, and I wanted to drive up and go all the way up to the coast. And I was like, yeah. And I remember I was like in an era, I was like, yeah, we're going to go see Aberdeen, Washington. It's like a little town, but it kind of has like a reputation, I think, for being kind of like backwoodsy. Again, there's the association with Nirvana. I don't know, and so I think she wanted to get as close to Aberdeen without being like Aberdeen. So she like Googled small cities, small places near Aberdeen, Washington, and she's like, Forks. Yep, that's where the story will take place, and go. And I think the entire book, if you're asking me, I'm going to talk about this throughout the book, obviously. I think Twilight for Stephenie Meyer. She seems to take it very seriously. I believe Twilight for her is a self insert. I believe Bella is meant to be Stephenie Meyer. Before the books came out, she already had like a fan cast, and so I think she had a dream and she fan casted. She saw Henry Cavill. She had everybody like picked out, and the way that Bella is described to throughout, it gives definitely some version of Stephenie Meyer. And also, there's a lot of theories floating around online, and I want to talk about them. One of my favorites, I'm an ex-Mormon, and so one of my favorite theories is that Carlisle is a like sit-in for Joseph Smith, and honestly, I can see it. I can see it, and it kind of, I don't know how it makes me feel about Carlisle anymore. It's like there's a Comic Con coming through, and it's like all of the Twilight people, a lot of them tour and go to a lot of comic conventions. My spouse was like, okay, but like if we went, like which one would you go to? And I'm like, I don't know how to say his last name. It's like Peter Fischelli. And I'm like, can we please go see? I want to go see Carlisle. Like, if I could pick any of those ones, I want to go see Carlisle or Jackson Rathbone, and I want to hear Battle Scars in person if possible. A lot of things, and we'll touch on that. We'll touch on the potential Mormon influence, the potential is this a sit-in for Stephenie Meyer? Is Bella supposed to be Stephenie Meyer? And that kind of experience. But yeah, it seems like she loved Phoenix. She loved living there, and she's moving, and she's worried about Renee. And there's this part, and I want to read this chapter to you, or like this section, not a whole chapter. Of course, she had Phil now, so the bills would probably get paid. There would be food in the refrigerator, gas in the car, and someone to call if she got lost. But still, dot, dot, dot. She's worried about her mom so bad that, like, she won't put gas in her car. Girl, this seems like a problem. Again, I think Bella is absolutely a parentified child and is almost taking care of Renee. And it seems like the move to Forks is almost a way to separate herself from that. And honestly, I get it. I understand. When she meets Charlie, Charlie's super, super awkward. It goes pretty fast. She's given the truck very quickly during the meeting, and there's a whole scene back and forth. Where did you get this? Like, she doesn't like it. She's not, she's like, how like old is this? And there's a part where Charlie says, well, no, I think it was in the early 60s or late 50s at the earliest. So this car is old, and she's driving it in the winter. It's still running. I mean, what an investment, that car was. But they've done a bunch of work with the engine. Would that even be worth it? People who are car people, like, would this be a thing, or would this just be like a project car? But like, for why? Like, not to get it running right for good, would it? I don't know. I have a lot of questions. There's also a part, and I want to talk about some of the rhetoric that's within this chapter. So most of what I make online is actually like disability-based content. And so I want to talk about things like that and also dissect the issues, because there's a lot of discussion about Twilight and the impact on the Quileute people. And I want to make sure that I'm addressing all of that. And so if there's ever anything I'm missing, feel free to email me at my business email and let me know, and I can correct myself. I am just one person, and I have a lot of Twilight lore floating around in here, but I'm definitely going to get some things wrong. But she asks about Billy, and Charlie replies he's in a wheelchair now, and he continued when I didn't respond, so he can't drive anymore. And so he offered to sell me his truck cheap. And so from what I'm to understand, Billy had something happen with diabetes. Like, not to say like in Billy's case, like he couldn't drive, but like I hate to be like that person, but it's like I don't know. You people in wheelchairs drive. People who have diabetes-based issues, even limb loss, can drive. And so maybe it's like a financial issue. But that is specifically called out in the chapter. Yeah, Bella's shocked that the car is potentially as old as like the late 50s. And she's like, well, how much was it? And he's like, it was just cheap. It's like your gift. It was for free. That she has a part where she's thinking, and she goes, wow, free. And I'm like, Bella, you don't, do you think Renee would buy you anything? Any car? No, 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 she wouldn't. So I don't know. It is maybe not the safest car. Like, should Charlie be letting you take this out? I don't know. But you know, it's something. It's something, and it's probably such a small town. You don't have to drive very far. She says that being in Forks and being happy is an impossibility, and she tries to be nice to Charlie because she doesn't want to like rub off her melancholy on him. Essentially, lives in a 2-bedroom house that he bought with her mom, and she thinks in her head many times it's like very difficult to be in the house because Charlie clearly like never moved on from her mother. And it's just little, it's not updated. It still has like the cabinets that her mom painted. It's got the linoleum. And when she goes to her room, it's even more dramatic. Like in the book, he's like, I got you a purple bedspread. But like here, she like goes in there and there's still like very childlike things laid about the room, including a rocking chair from when she was a baby. And so that's all still sitting in the room. And so it seems like Charlie just kind of left the house as like a time capsule, like whether out of grief or hurt, whatever. Again, does say this in the movie, and she says this in the book. One of the best things about Charlie is that he doesn't hover. And I think Bella really needs that space. Bella really needs a second to like figure out who Bella is. She goes on to state that Forks High School had a only 357, now 58 students. But she says that there are more than 700 people in her junior class alone back home. And I can kind of relate to this. I moved through different schools through Wyoming. None of them were very big, but the class that I ended up graduating from was no bigger than 8. But I went to my sister's graduation, and that was so long. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it was like one blip that it was about the person that you're there for. Like all of it is. But the school that I went to, it wasn't like that. So I don't know, these big graduations, these big high schools, I don't know. I don't know. But when I think, and when I was reading the book as a kid, I imagined my junior high as like her high school. And the school like got torn down. It was like an old historical school with like a big, beautiful theater. But it had like asbestos. It was like not good. It was like a very, very old school. But I imagined different parts of it, and that's how the school would look. I don't know if anyone else, and they're reading this, like, how did you imagine the high school looked? I imagined like the school that I was going to at the time. There's several different points within the book where Bella refers to herself as albino, or will say things like she's like just as pale as her, the albino. And I'm like, ooh, let's not say that to talk about your pale skin. Bella, you have pale skin. You are not albino. That's vaguely offensive. That's offensive actually. Like don't say that. And I don't know. I don't want to speak for people, but yeah, let's not say that. Like that's something that people have, or and is a part of people. You are just pale. It's not the same thing. Like an absence of melanin within the skin is not the same as just being super super pale. It's, you can be very pale. You can be very similarly pale, but you're just, the constant call out throughout the chapter to albino is like, ooh, Bella chill. Sometimes I wondered if I was seeing the same things through my eyes that the rest of the world was seeing through theirs. Maybe there was a glitch in my brain. And when I read this in the book, this is one of my favorite pieces of text in the book. I'm going to read it one more time. Sometimes I wondered if I was seeing the same things through my eyes that the rest of the world was seeing through theirs. Maybe there was a glitch in my brain. And I'm going to, again, I'm just going to talk about a lot of things and I'm going to throw things out there. This is my podcast. This is my place to talk about Twilight and to dissect it in the way that I want to. When I see this, a lot of people talk about how Bella feels like autistic. A lot of people say that Bella, headcanon for them, is autistic. And honestly, reading through this first chapter and then the mannerisms and her way of speaking, I could definitely see it, how she interprets the world, how she sees the world. I think there's a lot to go off there, but this specifically stood out to me as somebody who is autistic. I was like, wow, like that feels real. But that's how Bella is feeling right now. She's really not feeling great about the move right now. And she is liking living at Charlie's because Charlie doesn't hover, but that also means Charlie's not around very often, and she feels kind of smothered. Like I said, the house like hasn't changed, and so it feels like Charlie hasn't let go from her mother. But obviously Renee's like been gone. She no longer cares about Charlie Swan, but she just like describes things through the house in a way. Again, she's a teenager, so I'm trying to give her some slack. His small kitchen with dark paneled walls, bright yellow cabinets, and white linoleum floor. So it just like hasn't been updated in a while, and I don't know like how deep that goes, but it seems like it bothers her. She seems to really again take note of the cabinets that her mom painted. It says in an attempt to bring some sunshine into the house. People who live in that like part of the United States, like how dark is it? Is it very gloomy? Like I said, I've been to Newport and parts of Washington. It was definitely like a different environment, obviously, than Florida. But I don't know, like how is it year round? I visited in like March and it was fairly, well, no, I visited in June. And it was, I mean, fairly dark and fairly cool for June. One second, let me clear my throat and take a drink. With podcasts, there's so much talking. And through, there's still a wedding picture of Charlie and her mom from Las Vegas. Like, he really needs to clean up the house, put some stuff up for a garage sale, put some stuff in the attic, ask Bella if she wants stuff, and get rid of it. Completely reno the house, make it Charlie's. But I think sometimes in your grief and your depression, that doesn't even matter. And it seems like that's kind of where Charlie's existing. It was impossible. So I'm going to read the exact quote. It was impossible being in the house not to realize that Charlie had never gotten over my mom. It made me uncomfortable. So she specifically calls out that she's not feeling very well under the given circumstances. So she ran into the truck. She talks about different aspects of the truck. She describes the truck more, and she describes that it smells like tobacco, gasoline, and peppermint. And I'm like, that smells delightful. I'm going to look, and before the next podcast, the beginning, I'm going to let you guys know if I find any fragrances that would smell like Bella's truck. But that's to do later. And I want to talk about this also. So she talks about how small Forks is and how different the school is. And she goes, I wondered nostalgically, where were the chain link fences and the metal detectors? Bella, what are you trying to say by that? Your old school had chain link fences, like in a way to like deter people. I think like was there barbed wire, metal detectors, and like today that makes sense. Like today reading that, that's like I think a lot of schools have features like that, but back in the day, what? What kind of school were you attending? People who are in the Phoenix area, what was your school like this, the mid 2000s? Because interesting. I also went to, like I said, a small school, like the back doors were open. Hopefully they've cleaned up security now in the modern day. But like back when I was a kid, like everybody knew what doors would be unlocked. Like there was no security like I hear described today. There's a lot more security when it comes to me going to the school for my son. They have like double doors, a lot of things. A lot. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it sounds like she's like comparing her old school to like being like prison like. Again, laments that she misses the city and is really not feeling the Forks experience. There's multiple points where she has to introduce herself throughout the school to either like teachers, faculty, whatever. And all of them have differing responses because they all know, obviously. And I didn't really think about it from this perspective, even though I grew up in a small town as a kid. Like, everybody probably knew about Renee and Charlie's divorce and kind of knows that like Bella's not around but comes around sometimes and is back, or has run-ins with the law, it seems. But Bella herself even calls it out. I was expected a topic of gossip, no doubt. Daughter of chief's flighty ex-wife, come home at last. The truck seems to be like a place of comfort and solace for Bella through this first week of school, and like I totally get it. I remember returning back to school, and going to a different school at the time, but I had my car, and so it was always like a way that I felt like I could leave, or I don't know, it was like my place outside of the walls of my home. She talks about how comfortable she feels, and she specifically says, and like, I don't know, do you like it or not like it when books do this? But it goes, no one was going to bite me. I finally exhaled and stepped out of the truck. It's like, oh, very clever, Stephanie Meyer, very clever. She introduces herself to a teacher who, like, again, none of the teachers want any smoke. They don't even make her like introduce themselves, anything. They just like have her sit down. So I don't know what the feelings are about Charlie within like the general community. It seems like the pool of people that we know, like Charlie's great, but like I don't know, her name, the name definitely precedes her to everybody that she meets. She's kind of mean to the different people she meets. A gangly boy with skin problems and black hair as an oil slick leaned across the aisle to talk to me. She talks to different boys, and it's like these, you know, I don't know. Maybe we all went to high school. There's always these boys. I don't know if that's what Stephanie Meyer was trying to capture. There's like always like these kind of, I don't want to call them crusty boys, but there's these boys that would kind of, if you gave a mouse a cookie, I could never be mean to anybody. And so I would have a string of people who maybe didn't understand that I wasn't interested otherwise. They would assert themselves as like overly friendly in the beginning and would be shocked when you weren't interested in like initiating a relationship. And that's like kind of the vibe I get from these people. This is Eric, by the way, who is described this way. They have a conversation, and once again, the albinism is referenced. They go, "You don't look very tan. My mother is part albino," she tells him. Her first run-in with the Cullens is in the cafeteria, and Bella honestly is super rude. She remembers nobody's name. She sits down, she's like, this girl from Spanish class, but she clearly like knows her enough to feel comfortable to like sit next to her during lunch. And she takes note of the Cullen while she's sitting there and is like, they all have like untouched food, looked really attractive. Rosalie is described as like a Victoria's Secret model. Alice is described as a fairy. Emmett is described right here as a serious weightlifter with dark curly hair. And they talk about the taller, leaner, muscular honey blonde character, which is Jasper. And then there was a much less bulky, untidy, bronze-colored hair. He was more boyish than the others. He looked like he could be in college or even teachers here rather than students. And they make multiple calls to this that like they look older. And so it's like, why does Carlisle keep sending them to school? I think they'd prefer a job at like the mall at this point, like an Orange Julius job, to going to high school again. Like, I would be so over it. And you see, like, in the movie, the collection that they have of graduation hats, it's like, Bella the entire time's like, they just look older. Like, they are older looking. Like, why are they so much older looking? Maybe it's because they're pretty. And she does like have like a separate part where she's like specifically thinks about how pretty Rosalie is and how attractive Edward is. So she thinks about both of them. But I want to talk about how they're described in the books, because honestly, if I saw this, I would be horrified, because I want to describe to you how they're described in the books and how I'm seeing them in my head reading it as an adult. They were chalky pale. They were paler than me. Again, they say the albino. And they all had very dark eyes. And they described Edward's eyes in the science room as black, basically. So they have like just coal black eyes. They're chalky chalky pale. But they're all kind of like attractive. They have very striking features, but they also have what they describe as purplish, almost bruise like shadows underneath their eyes. So, what I'm imagining is almost like a Funko Pop, like me character, where they're just like dark eyes, and Edward's described as like angry all the time. So, his is like the angry me eyes, and then they're super chalky, but then like cut and like I don't know, like the way where they're like the Chad filters, like that's what I see in my head. And then they're dressed really nice, but then they look older, like they're definitely not in high school. Like, and I wonder, I'm like, do they look like they're like a scale of like 1 to Greece? How out of high school do they look? You know what I mean? Like it seems like they could definitely get away with not returning to high school. But they also just, again, describes them as all being very attractive. As one point, she describes them as being painted by a master the face of an angel. But that's not how I feel like it's described. They're like they have like these deep, scary eyes. They're striking. There's something different about them. They're chalky. They have bruises under their eyes, but they're like beautiful in a way. And I'm like, ooh, are they like a sick Victorian child? Like I'm just not understanding. And she again asks the girl from the Spanish class because she forgets, and she references this multiple times with all of the kids that she's met. She's like, who are they? And she's more interested in that than she is with the people who are giving her like time, energy, and paying attention to her. And basically goes through the similar spiel in the movie. One thing that she says that stuck out to me is like they all lived together, Dr. Cullen and his wife, she said under her breath. And she really, really, really wants to drive home again that like they're all like related, and it's weird that they're all adopted and dating, and she like just doesn't understand it. And Bella thinks that they're strange, unpopular names, the kinds of names their grandparents had. And like I don't know, just curious, do like all of those names like trigger like super old names? Like Alice, I feel like has definitely been more popular recently. It's an older name. Emmett, I feel like I don't know. Emmett, the Lego movie. I don't know. I'm just like going through names. Rosalie seems older, I guess. But there's definitely people like my age named Rosalie, so I don't think that would be like out of the question. Like they're not any older than Isabella. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like Edward is like a very normal name. Like Carlisle, I've never heard before. Esme seems like a very old-fashioned name. But they're older, I guess. You know what I mean? So, but like the kids themselves don't have like to me these super old archaic names. I can't even like hold it back. She's like, they are very nice looking. I struggled with a conspicuous understatement. So she's like, I'm holding even in how I feel. They are so hot. Like, do you guys like see those people over at the lunch table? They do you guys see those guys? Like that's the vibe I'm getting. She's like inside, she's like, is nobody seeing these super beautiful people? Talk about how they're adopted, and Dr. Cullen is also really young. He is in his 20s or early 30s. And I just turned 30, and I'm trying to imagine having a bunch of teenage children that I adopted, and that just already sounds sketchy. Like, I know their idea is to be like hidden, but it sounds sketchy to me. But they're foster children, and they look a little too old for foster children. They once again reference because they do not need to be returning to high school. I'd like to know about this. So they kind of talk about where they were before. They're like, yeah, they just moved back like a couple years ago from Alaska. So I'd like to know about their time in Alaska. Do we really get any insight to that? I don't remember. If you guys remember any insight to the Cullen's Alaskan Adventures, I would like to see it. Or Stephanie Meyer, I heard you're writing a new book. How about the Cullen's Alaskan Adventures? I think that'd be really good. But they also really hammer home that Edward was supposed to have like really reddish, more ginger-like hair, which doesn't necessarily show in the movie. Like I think Edward Robert Pattinson has like warm hair, but not necessarily the same hair. But he doesn't. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like per the descriptions so far, like it's fair. I think everybody that was casted very fair. We had to get reminded about Angela's name, so once again, she does not care about anyone but herself and anyone's names. But she would be very offended if somebody was like, "What was your name again?" "Oh, Bella." I think she'd be upset, but constantly through the whole thing, she's like, "And your name is?" So like we sat together for lunch for like the last week. What do you mean? What's my name? So moving through, we already kind of talked like this. It's the scene, the science room scene. Again, his eyes are described as coal black, but she goes in and she's like, "Dang it!" And it's similar to the movie where she's like, "Am I like stinky?" But she goes, "Inconspicuously, I sniffed my hair. It smelled like strawberries." And so, just while we're here, does anyone know of a strawberry shampoo that would preferably be good for color? I think that sounds delightful. It's like a shampoo that smells so strong, like of strawberries, you can smell it. I know like VO5 has one, but I don't think I can use VO5. Right now I use Native Sugar Cookie, and then when I need a really good cleanse on my scalp, I use the Rose Hips. But that's a different from Herbal Essences. That's a different rant. That's a different rant. Another video. Podcast, back to the podcast, back to the podcast. And like again, she's like wondering the whole time, does she stink? He's like being like really rude, really mean. And when the class ends, he is out of the class before she can even blink. And she's imagine like you're sitting next to somebody who's like, ugh, like so disgusted, like looking with you, like scooting away, and you're like, what is like? Do I stink? Like checking your deodorant, you're like checking your hair. You're like, why am I stinky? When did I get stinky? And then the bell rings and they just like fly out of there, and she's left in her seat flabbergasted, like what the heck. And she even thinks to herself, he was so mean, it wasn't fair. And like that is mean. Imagine like just the first impressions you have of what we know through the rest of the story is that he's mean, that he thinks maybe she stinks, and just like bolts it afterwards after thinking that she was super stinky, or what she perceives as super stinky. And then she meets with Mike, and Mike also offers help. He doesn't know how she feels about him, but he also took notice of how Edward was behaving. So Edward was behaving like so overly disgusted with Bella that even other people in the class were like, what the hell? And he's like, so did you stab Edward Cullen with a pencil or what? I've never seen him act like that. And again, I think it was almost downplayed in the movie. They like have like the window open where it like moves and stuff, and he's like, ugh. But like it truly seems like he was like being like so melodramatic, like leaning and like just not, being there, just being so obnoxious in a way where you're like, oh my god, like what was your problem? And then Mike already has perceptions, like everybody has perceptions. Like Jessica's like, yeah, they're kind of hot, aren't they? But Mike's like, he's a weird guy. If I were lucky enough to sit by you, I would have talked to you. He's one of those guys. Mike is one of those guys that's like, without me, sad face. I don't like Mike, and obviously they're all high school kids. But I remember reading this as a kid, and I was like, the rest of the boys disgust me. And when they casted them in the movies, they definitely did them a service, like, and kind of polished up the characters, because it seems like they're kind of gross, and maybe it's just how Bella's seeing them. They're just like not cute boys that are like desperate for her attention, and it doesn't really seem like she's interested. She's happy to have like somebody around because she's not so lonely during the day, but she doesn't necessarily want to initiate like a huge friendship. Once again, they reference his tousled bronze hair, so imagine bronze, kind of, maybe mostly in the first one. I need to watch it and then we can review these notes. I just watched them again, but I feel like I need to watch them again. I've watched Twilight twice this year, but I'm like a third time so I can make sure that I'm up to date when I'm talking for my podcast. This podcast so far has gone longer than my Service Dog podcast. I don't know if we'll even have time to film the Service Dog podcast because I have so much to say about this first chapter. So much happens in this chapter. Anyway, she ends up going to the office, and she noticed, again, this is another first impression that she has of who will be her future baby daddy. He's arguing with the people at the office about how he needs to move classes, and it's the class that he's in with her. And she's like, oh my goodness, like what did I do? And he is upset. And then, like, kind of once he realizes that she's there, he's just like, fine, I'll just have to, like, deal with it. Thank you for your help. And then just, like, leaves. And she kind of describes how the Cullens move as gliding. And I think they tried to capture that and did an okay job in the movie. But then, like, she, like, was like, what the heck just happened? And has to take time in her truck to decompress. And this is kind of the end of the first chapter. She was the last truck in the lot. It felt like haven. It was the closest thing to home. I had in this damp green hole, is what she describes Forks as. I sat inside for a while, just staring out at the windshield blankly. But soon I but soon I was cold enough to need the heater, so I turned the keys in the engine. To life. I headed back to Charlie's house, fighting tears the whole way there. So, like, Edward hurt her feelings. Her first impression of her future husband, her future baby daddy, is he's mean, he's chalky, and he thinks that she stinks. And they're weird, and they don't eat their lunches and just throw it away. Like, that's her first perception of these people. I can't tell that I would be drawn in, but we're going to continue. Like I said, this was the first time I've read these books since, gosh, maybe 10 years. I think I read them for the last time when I was pregnant with my son, and he's now 11. So this is a brand new adventure. This would be, I reread this chapter 3 times in preparation for this podcast. Like I said, I've been casually watching the movies, but we will do a more in-depth movie podcast. Maybe we'll split the movies into 3s. I don't know. So many possibilities. I have a lot to edit, and I want to make sure that you guys have this soon. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want more, please subscribe, and I will continue to make more podcasts as I read through the book and feel like I have a grasp on the chapter and feel like I have good things that I want to talk about. So the next chapter is called Open Book, and this chapter was called First Sight. And the next chapter that we will be discussing is called Open Book, and it is chapter 2, and I'm so excited to get into it with you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I can't wait to connect with more people who really like Twilight like I do, and kind of just delve into the special interests that I've had and really just crack it open and look at it again as an adult with a fully formed cortex, with the life experiences as I've had, such as, like I said, I am an ex-Mormon, and I had I really, really liked these books when I was a kid, and I want to tell you guys stories about the books, and like I said, I had to originally sneak reading it because my mom, I think, thought they were of like an adult material. I really don't know what they thought. And there was like another point where they were like, hold up, I think these books are naughty, and I don't know if you need to read these. But especially like the first couple are so tame, and so I'm really excited, and it's really healing and fun to go through these again. So I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you guys so much for watching my new podcast, and I will see you when I see you. I'm hoping to have these up a couple of times a week because I really don't want to be reading this book for the rest of my life. I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you guys so much for watching again. My name is Charlie from It's Barbie Paris. I will talk to you soon.